What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to bring you my 20th anniversary review of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I just saw the movie again in theaters, and we do have to say again because I actually was lucky enough 20 years ago as just an 8-year-old boy. I still remember, and I want to kind of go over that story really briefly. I watched it. It was the very first Star Wars movie I ever saw in theaters. Super special, and this is my favorite Star Wars movie. It always has, and it always will be. Seeing it again 20 years later, it was honestly kind of surreal. Now, I will say, I mean, there's the fan in me that just kind of like soaks it all up, thinks it's amazing. I do kind of want to go into a couple different things that because I haven't watched this movie, I would say, in probably 5 or 6 years. I have watched it, obviously, many, many times, and it's probably my most watched Star Wars movie of all time as well. But I haven't watched it in a while, and seeing it in theaters on the big screen, there's a few things I kind of want to just throw out there. So, firstly, like I said, very first movie I ever saw, Star Wars movie, I guess I should say, when I was just a little boy, right, 8 years old. I remember seeing C-3PO and Chewbacca on a cereal box, and I remember it was probably a Kellogg or something, but I remember seeing it on a cereal box. I remember asking my mom, who are they? And she told me from Star Wars, and that's literally how it all started. Literally a cereal box at a store. So thank you to my mom for bringing me to wherever that was. And I proceeded to watch episode 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. I did all of that, and that was leading in because this was, I mean, if you recall, Chewbacca's in this movie for maybe like 2 minutes. C-3PO is also in this movie for only like 2 minutes. But they were postered in Darth Vader and obviously a lot of kind of promotional material back 20 years ago. But I can see the promotional material kind of clear as day on that cereal box. And I mean, I just fell in love. I watched all those movies. And so then we were going into episode 3 for the first time. And I remember being scared. I remember standing, the door of my house at the time was kind of like down a few steps, like from the main floor. I remember standing there, my parents getting the keys, and I remember kind of being like afraid because up until that point, I probably had only watched like, I don't know, Disney things or whatever was in movie theaters for like a young boy, and I didn't know if I was ready, to watch. But I remember, I watched all the Star Wars movies at home, and I went and I just freaking absolutely loved it. General Grievous became my favorite Star Wars character. He still is, I think, to this day. That movie just blew me away. And for the signature moments, and also, you don't really think about, I think, as an 8-year-old, the negative parts to it, right? And I didn't really think about any negative parts of any Star Wars movie at that point. So that was my experience back then. Seeing it now again, I guess between 8 and 28 in the last 20 years, I've watched this film so many times. And the signature moments still hit. And I think I would say that, now. I mean, seeing it on screen, I thought it was going to kind of be like the theater in the back of AMC, where it's like 20 seats or whatever. No, this was like a pretty legitimate sized theater that I went to, and there's quite a few people there as well. It wasn't packed, but it wasn't empty as well. 2 guys with a lightsaber or lightsabers, which I thought was pretty cool. So, I think people were enjoying it, and man, oh man, it still is my favorite. It really is. I don't think it's the best. I mean, I really think I look to 5 or 6 as probably the best Star Wars. But in terms of just my favorite, I mean, the highs of this movie, the opening, like the battle over Coruscant, and pretty much there's a lot of pauses in this movie, and that's something that I don't think I forgot. I think I know this movie like the back of my hand. I've watched it so many times, but again, seeing it so big, and I would check my phone a couple of times, but overall, no, I mean, I was glued, right? And it's not like watching it for the 50th time at home where maybe you do something else and you kind of go back to it back and forth. You're there and you're in the moment. What I will say, I actually kind of forgot about the pacing issues, and I do think this movie, that is probably my signature bad thing with this film. You could probably go deeper, but I don't really choose to, because I think a lot of things were specifically chosen, by George Lucas to do. I've never really taken a hard stance to Hayden Christensen. I've always liked the portrayal. I mean, like, is he amazing? Is he an amazing actor? I really don't think so. I think he's very good at what he does. And I think the guy is so humble and so awesome. But, I mean, he plays Vader, I think, exactly how George Lucas wanted him to, right? So, like, the intense criticism that guy got, really, and still even to this day, probably less so, but, he's always gotten criticism. I would never really put that on him. I think that's how it was supposed to be. So, you can go deep into those things and, some of the decision making that was made. Like having, we've said this a lot, I think, just Star Wars fans in general, Clone Wars very much helps this movie, right? Because I guess that's another thing, I guess, that goes to pacing. The amount of things that they're trying to do in this movie is too much. Like, it's just factually way too freaking much. There are so many cuts, and that's something that I noticed, on the big screen, where it's like, when they're sitting in like a specific thing, the final battle is one of the greatest moments, I think, in any movie, movie history. Like the Grievous ObiWan stuff, or when Palpatine is being confronted by Mace Windu, and then like there's some unreal moments, but there is so much in between where how many scene transitions, like I should have counted them, because there's probably like 50 per segment, right? When they're jumping from Anakin to Padme, and then they're jumping here, and then they're jumping there, and they jump so much. And look, I mean, this is where I'll still support the movie. I'll still say, certain great things about it. I think a lot of this movie like needs to go certain ways. And this really is my favorite of all the Star Wars films. Like, are there lulls? Yes, but in all these scene transitions, well, it's building up this doubt in Anakin's mind. Let's take kind of that first, third of the movie. It's really building up. Okay, well, he's going to be appointed the counselors, like person on the board, right, on the Jedi Council, but it just, to get there, you have to go through like 3 different scenes. You have like Anakin meeting him, and then it jumps to another thing and jumps to another thing. I mean, like sprinkled in, you have like Darth Plagueis the Wise, right? Which is one of, I think, the greatest moments in any Star Wars movie. And that I really think shows a very strong strength that often doesn't get attributed to those, 6 movies, is kind of slowing the pace down and just kind of sitting there and talking, right? Literally telling a story, because again, where episode 3, I think, is actually at its strongest, is not really doing that. But then this kind of proves, but it still can. You can do something really, really special when it's just 2 people kind of bouncing, off of each other. And again, granted, that happens a lot. Like Anakin and Padme go at it, just talk back and forth. They do it a lot. Yoda and Anakin, like they pick so many pairs of people, put them in a room, and just have them like talk about something, right? But again, there's so much that's going on. There's so much buildup, and they have to do so much to get Anakin, mainly Anakin, but also kind of everybody, from one point to the next. And I think that kind of just adds up, over the film. And I think Clone Wars helps it. I think with hindsight, it's tough because I love Ahsoka, and I love, Clone Wars and what they kind of built there. Again, I think all the stuff that happens in Clone Wars does help, because it kind of builds Grievous, and it builds this length of the war and a lot of the relationships between these characters. The Ahsoka thing, I actually kind of go back and forth with, because like watching this movie, I got to be honest, I thought about Ahsoka during the Order 66 scene, and just thinking, oh yeah, like there's that whole other part to the Star Wars universe, this is very, secluded. But beyond that, I didn't really think about it. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes when I'm watching Clone War era, animated stuff, and thinking about how strong it is and how much it helps, I think going from Clone Wars and then thinking about episode 3, it enhances it. I don't know, when you're actually watching episode 3, I don't know if I buy that he had an apprentice. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't know if I can see it. And yet sometimes I can. I think it kind of just depends on my mindsets or mind space, whatever. But I mean, those are things that are kind of going through my mind. But, again, the strengths of this movie are always the strengths. Seeing Grievous on the big screen freaking rocks. The lightsaber battles, the best ones. And I mean, they're sprinkled throughout. I think they're extremely good. The Anakin ObiWan one, I mean, I'll always say, I mean, they've tried. They've definitely tried since then. They tried even before. I mean, think of like Phantom Menace and stuff. It could be debatable. I know people think, the Duel of the Fates, and that very powerful music, theme, characters, a choreography, all that jazz. But I don't know. There's something so incredibly powerful about Anakin versus Obi-Wan. There's something very powerful, I think, to Order 66. Again, I think all of the other stuff added value to it, because like in the moment, I mean, these clones are just like switching on a dime, and some of them are not even receiving the orders, right? Like when it goes to other planets and stuff, and they're just running, and all of a sudden they stop and shoot. I guess they were told maybe through their helmets, because there's no other way they could have known to swap it. But I do think it was the right move to do like the chip, and just the idea that it wasn't really their choice. And I like that more than, I guess, the movie, like what was shown. But, the attack on the Jedi Council, you can just go, I mean, I think we all know this movie, right? But you can just kind of go scene by scene, and there's so much good. I think, again, the weaknesses of this movie is really when it stops. the middle of this movie is very slow because it's just jumping. I mean, well, it's slow, but it also does jump. So it's kind of like jarring a bit. But I mean, it's just scene after scene after scene after scene of building. But I will say, okay, that is a weakness, but it's done with a purpose. And I think, and I think it's got the best acting of that trilogy. I think it's got the most like powerful kind of moments, and what it's building up to is the most powerful. So they're still playing, I think, from a lot of strengths, because even when the movie, I think, is at its weakest, it's still probably better than most things in episodes 1 and 2. So that's kind of just my thoughts. I mean, I did love it. I still love it to this day. I can see the flaws in it. I don't think it's a perfect film by any means, but it's always going to be a special one. Like, I'll always get almost legitimate chills with Order 66, and some of the freaking music. Anakin versus ObiWan has the choreography, but then also the music in the background, that score. Holy dear God. And yeah, I mean, I love this film overall. Very happy I got to do it. And I don't know, maybe we'll have to get back together, 30th anniversary, 40th. But no, I'm glad I did this. I don't know if they did this for like 10 or 15. I was around. I just don't remember having the opportunity, I guess, to do it. But I'm super happy, I was able to for the 20th. And I knew it was happening because I'm planning eventually on Back to the Past to play the episode 3 video game, which is one of, I think, the greatest movie tie-ins. And there's a whole story there that I think is just spectacular. But, that game freaking rocks. So I was always planning on doing that for the 20th anniversary. And I always thought, okay, well, I'll probably watch the movie for the 20th as well. And when they announced it was coming to theaters, it's like, okay, well, this is an easy thing. I don't go to the theaters actually often at all. Go maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year. I had to make an exception, though, to see this. It's just one of my all-time favorites. Not just my favorite Star Wars movie, but I mean, you're probably talking about a top 10 film. I mean, it's different, right? Like, you can get all like film snobby and all that stuff, and that's fine. I mean, look, there's a lot of tremendous movies and people that do some really good, analysis of it. But just in terms of like pure favorites and just not necessarily guilty pleasure, but just like I'll always think it's good. I'll always freaking love it to death. I think to like some of the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff, Harry Potter, things like that. But Star Wars Episode 3 has got to be in the top 10, probably in the top 5, to be honest. So that's my thoughts on it. It was super, super great to see it again. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.